Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive into something pretty heavy today.
Yeah, sounds good.
We're going to be looking at some recent events in Nigeria, specifically some deadly stampedes that have happened at charity events. And we're going to kind of unpack what these events tell us about the country's economic struggles.
Right.
I know it's heavy stuff, but by understanding the why behind these tragedies, we can get a deeper understanding of kind of these events and their connection to some bigger issues.
Yeah, pretty.
We've got three sources for this deep dive today. CBS News, Al Jazeera, and Sky News. All three of them paint a pretty grim picture. Multiple stampedes, different parts of Nigeria, dozens of deaths, a lot of them children.
Yeah, and it's really tragic. And you know what's really striking is that all these stampedes happened at events where people were gathered to receive essential goods, food, clothing, prizes, like things that shouldn't be a matter of life or death, you know?
Yeah. The CBS article mentions that at the December 21st stampede at the Holy Trinity Catholic Church in Abuja, 10 people died. And some people had waited overnight for a chance to get food. That level of desperation is just unimaginable.
Yeah, it really highlights the economic situation that a lot of Nigerians are facing. This isn't just about, one-off incidents. It's about a system that's failing to meet the basic needs of its people.
So let's dig into that system a bit. What exactly is going on in Nigeria economically that's driving this level of desperation?
Well, all three sources point to kind of a perfect storm of factors. Nigeria is grappling with its worst cost of living crisis in decades. Inflation is soaring at over 34% annually, a 28-year high, according to Al Jazeera. And to put that into perspective, the article quotes Amnesty International saying, for many Nigerians, having ordinary rice at home is turning into a luxury.
Wow. It's one thing to read the statistics, but to hear it put like that, it really hits home. So what's causing this economic crisis? Is it just bad luck, or are there specific policies that have kind of made the situation worse?
I mean, it's definitely not just bad luck. While global economic factors play a role, government policies in Nigeria have definitely contributed to the hardship. All three sources highlight cuts to electricity and fuel subsidies as major contributors to this soaring inflation. And Sky News specifically points out that these cuts have led to an increase in the cost of transportation, food production, basically everything else.
Okay, so that's a major blow to the average Nigerian. Are there any other policies we should be aware of?
Yeah. Another key factor is currency devaluation. Essentially, the government has intentionally weakened its currency, the naira, in an attempt to stabilize the economy. However, as the CBS News article points out, this has had the unintended consequence of making imported goods much more expensive, which further fuels inflation.
So we've got these policies that are seemingly backfiring, hurting everyday Nigerians. And these were implemented under President Bola Tinubu, who took office in May 2023, promising renewed hope. Right.
That's right. And there's a certain irony in the fact that, as Al Jazeera reports, President Tinubu canceled his official events in Lagos on December 21st, the same day as the Abuja church stampede. In honor of the stampede victims, it kind of highlights the disconnect between the government's actions and the lived realities of its people.
Yeah, it does feel like a slap to the face a little bit. On one hand, you've got the president expressing condolences, and on the other hand, you have people literally risking their lives for a bag of rice because of policies his administration has implemented.
Yeah, it certainly raises questions about the government's priorities and whether their actions are really aligned with their stated goals.
Okay, so we've talked about these policies. That seem to be directly impacting the lives of Nigerians. But there's another element that's been mentioned across all three sources, government corruption. How does that fit into this economic crisis puzzle?
That's a crucial piece of the puzzle. Corruption within the government has a ripple effect on every aspect of the economy. It means that even when policies are designed with good intentions, they're often not implemented effectively, or the intended aid doesn't reach those who need it most.
Right. It's not just about the policies on paper, but about how they play out in reality. So what are we talking about here? Is it small-scale bribery? Or are we talking about something more systemic?
It's definitely a systemic issue. We're talking about embezzlement of public funds, manipulation of contracts, and a general lack of accountability at various levels of government. This has eroded trust in the system and made it incredibly difficult to address the economic crisis effectively.
This lack of trust has real consequences, right? The CBS article mentions the August protests, where people were demanding better opportunities for young people. At least 20 people were killed and hundreds arrested.
Exactly, these protests. And the tragic stampedes we discussed earlier. They aren't isolated incidents. They're symptoms of a deeper malaise within Nigerian society. This sense of frustration and hopelessness fueled by economic hardship, and a lack of faith in the government's ability or willingness to address it.
So we're seeing a complex interplay of factors here. These stampedes are not just about people being desperate for food. They're about a system that's failing to provide for its people, policies that are making the situation worse, and a government that's struggling to gain the trust of its citizens.
Yeah, it's a multi-layered problem, and sadly not a new one. The CBS article reminds us that a similar tragedy happened in 2022, when 31 people died in a stampede at a church charity event. This kind of recurring pattern underscores how persistent these issues are, and the urgent need for some sustainable solutions.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking to think this isn't the first time this has happened, and that it could happen again if things don't change. Speaking of change, the CBS News article also mentioned that the police in Abuja are now requiring prior permission for any charity event. What are your thoughts on that? Is that a step in the right direction? Or could it backfire?
It's a tricky situation. On the one hand, regulating these events could help prevent stampedes by ensuring better crowd control and safety measures. But it's important to consider the potential downsides, too.
Like what, for example?
Well, if it becomes more difficult to organize these events, it might discourage people and organizations from providing aid, which could leave the most vulnerable even more desperate, and potentially push them towards more dangerous, unregulated gatherings.
Yeah, that's a good point. It seems like a Band-Aid solution that doesn't really address the root causes: poverty, inequality, corruption. We need to think bigger.
Absolutely. We need solutions that empower people and create opportunities for economic advancement. Simply trying to control the symptoms won't solve the underlying disease.
So what would some of those solutions look like?
Well, tackling corruption is paramount. Strengthening anti-corruption agencies, promoting transparency in government spending, and holding corrupt officials accountable. Those are all crucial steps.
I imagine that's easier said than done, though, right? I mean, corruption is often deeply entrenched.
Yeah, it's definitely a complex challenge, but not an insurmountable one. It requires political will, public pressure, and a commitment to building strong institutions that serve the people rather than personal interests.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right.
What else needs to happen?
Investing in education and job creation is essential. Providing people with the skills and opportunities they need to lift themselves out of poverty is a key part of any sustainable solution.
Right, it's about breaking the cycle of poverty and dependence. And what about these cuts to electricity and fuel subsidies? Could reversing those help alleviate some of the immediate hardship?
That's a complex debate, with valid arguments on both sides. While subsidies can provide short-term relief, they can also be costly and inefficient. The key is to find a balance between providing essential support to those in need while also promoting sustainable economic growth.
Sounds like there's no easy fix.
There isn't. It requires a multifaceted approach that addresses the economic, political, and social dimensions of the problem.
Okay, so we've talked about the need for systemic change, tackling corruption, and investing in education and job creation. What about the role of international aid and organizations? Can they play a part in alleviating this crisis?
Absolutely. International aid can provide critical support in terms of disaster relief, humanitarian assistance, and development projects. However, it's essential that this aid is delivered effectively and transparently, ensuring it reaches those who need it most and isn't lost to corruption.
So accountability is key, both on the part of the Nigerian government and the international organizations providing aid.
Exactly. It's about collaboration, partnership, and a shared commitment to improving the lives of the Nigerian people.
You know, we've been focusing a lot on the big picture, the systemic issues. But I keep thinking about those individual stories, those lives lost in the stampedes. It's a stark reminder that these issues have real human consequences.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Behind the statistics and policy debates are real people struggling to survive, families grieving the loss of loved ones, and a nation grappling with immense challenges.
And it's easy to feel overwhelmed by the scale of it all, to feel like there's nothing we can do as individuals. But I think it's important to remember that even small actions can make a difference.
I agree. Staying informed, engaging in meaningful conversations, supporting organizations doing good work on the ground, and holding our leaders accountable. These are all ways we can contribute to positive change.
It's about recognizing that we're all part of a global community, and that what happens in one part of the world affects us all.
Exactly. We have a shared responsibility to address these challenges and work towards a more just and equitable world.
Yeah, it's easy to feel a little powerless, you know. when you see this kind of hardship. But we can't let that paralyze us. Awareness is the first step towards action.
Right. And we've uncovered a lot to be aware of today. I mean, we've gone from these shocking headlines about these stampedes to a deeper understanding of the economic desperation that's fueling them, the role of government policies.
And the issue of corruption.
Exactly. And while we focus specifically on Nigeria, these issues, they resonate far beyond its borders. This speaks to a global challenge, the persistence of poverty and inequality in a world of abundance.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's easy to get caught up in the specifics of one country. But this is a story that that plays out in different forms all over the world.
Absolutely. And it forces us to ask some tough questions about our interconnectedness, about our responsibility to each other. In a globalized world, if people are willing to risk their lives for basic necessities in one part of the world, what does that say about the systems we've created? What does that say about our values?
Those are some tough questions, but necessary ones. So where do we go from here? We've talked about some potential solutions, but how do we move from talk to action?
Well, I think it starts with a shift in perspective. We need to move beyond the idea of charity as a solution and embrace the concept of justice. It's about creating systems that empower people, provide access to education, healthcare, economic opportunity.
So it's not just about giving handouts. It's about addressing the root causes of poverty and inequality.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that everyone deserves a chance to thrive, not just survive.
Okay, so that's the big picture. But what about on an individual level? What can we do?
Oh, there's so many ways to contribute. We can support organizations working to address poverty and inequality, both in Nigeria and around the world. We can advocate for policies that promote economic justice and hold our leaders accountable. We can educate ourselves and others about these issues and engage in meaningful conversations.
So it's about staying informed, being engaged, and using our voices and resources to make a difference, however small it might seem.
Exactly. And I think it's important to remember that change doesn't happen overnight. It's a long-term process. That requires persistence, commitment, and a belief in the possibility of a better future.
Well said. This deep dive has been a journey, hasn't it? From those initial shocking headlines to a deeper understanding of the complexities of Nigeria's economic crisis, and ultimately, a call to action.
It really has. And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with this thought. The world can be a very different place, a more just and equitable one, if we choose to make it so. It starts with each of us, with our choices, our actions, and our unwavering commitment to creating a better world for everyone.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it sparked your curiosity and inspired you to continue exploring these issues and to find your own ways to make a difference. Remember, even small ripples can create big waves.